My name is Clara, and at 32, I thought I had finally pieced my life together. As a practicing attorney in Chicago, the last thing I expected was a call from my mother that shattered me. Her voice still echoes in my mind. You have 48 hours to gather your belongings. That house belongs to your brother now. The same house my grandmother had left to me, clearly stated in her will. In that instant, my world seemed to collapse. But instead of screaming back, I stayed quiet. They had no idea what I was preparing. Before I tell you what unfolded when my brother tried to walk through that door, let me give you some history. That house wasn't just property. It was my sanctuary, my grandmother's legacy. The old Victorian home stood proudly in the suburbs of Chicago, with its wraparound porch and shutters that my grandmother, Evelyn, and I painted sky blue when I was just 12. Built in 1920, its creaking hardwood floors and sweeping staircase carried the weight of generations. The kitchen, with its bay window overlooking a blooming garden of peonies every spring, was where I felt most at home, but more than its beauty, that house symbolized belonging. While my parents were too busy chasing careers and appearances, it was Grandma Evelyn who raised me. Summers and weekends were spent there, where the smell of her cinnamon rolls filled the air, and her laughter seemed to live in the walls. A woman must always know how to stand on her own, she used to tell me, guiding my hands to repair a leaky faucet or teaching me how to replace a tire. By the time I was 15, I could patch drywall, cook a Thanksgiving feast, and manage a garden. Side by side, we dug in the soil, her wrinkled but steady hands showing me how perennials returned if you gave them patience and care. When I got into law school, she converted her sunroom into my study corner. Surrounded by her plants, I prepared for my bar exam, fueled by her unwavering faith in me, a faith my parents, Margaret and Robert, never seemed to share. To them, success was measured in titles and prestige. My mother, polished and sharp, mapped my life before I even knew who I was. My father, cold and transactional, treated parenting like a business deal. Their disappointment was obvious when I chose public interest law instead of a lucrative corporate path. And then there was my brother, Daniel, 4 years younger, always the obedient one. He followed the path they had chosen, married the right woman, and became the golden child they adored. I was the rebellious one. When Grandma Evelyn passed 3 years ago, her will left no room for doubt the house was mine. I sat in the attorney's office, tears in my eyes, as gratitude mixed with grief. She knew how much it meant to me, how I had cared for her and the property when her arthritis made even the stairs difficult. Despite my parents' visible disapproval, the will was ironclad. Grandma had prepared everything carefully, even leaving me a handwritten letter tucked into my drawer. This house sheltered 4 generations of strong women. Now, Clara, it shelters you as you carve your path. I didn't move in right away. My job was downtown, and the commute from the suburbs was too demanding. But I visited often, kept the house in perfect condition, paid the taxes, and turned away developers who dangled offers. To me, it wasn't an asset, it was love and bricks and beams. My parents never understood. It's just a house, my mother scoffed whenever I mentioned renovations or gardening. To them, everything was measured in dollars, while to me, that home was priceless. I worked tirelessly through law school with part-time jobs and loans. My brother, meanwhile, had his entire education funded by them. When I graduated with honors, my parents barely clapped before rushing off to another gala. When I won my first major housing rights case, my father dismissed it as small-time work compared to Daniel's corporate deals. The rift between us widened year after year. I tolerated the digs at holiday dinners because that's what family was supposed to do. Or so I thought. I never imagined they'd stoop so low. Until that phone call. It was a Friday evening when my phone rang. I had just come back from court, drained after a grueling week defending a family fighting foreclosure. The sight of my mother's name flashing on the screen almost made me ignore it, but a nagging sense of duty made me answer. Clara, we need to discuss the house, my mother began, skipping any greeting. Her voice carried that clipped, business-like tone she used when the decision was already made and my opinion was irrelevant. What about it? I asked, sinking into my couch, unaware that my entire world was about to tilt. Your brother needs a place to live. As you know, his divorce was finalized last month, and he can't afford to stay in his old home. Your father and I have decided that he and Lily will move into your grandmother's house. I shot upright, my fatigue instantly replaced by adrenaline. What do you mean you've decided? That house is mine. Grandma left it to me in her will. Don't be difficult, Clara, my mother snapped. You don't even live there. It's just sitting empty while your brother and his daughter have nowhere to go. Family helps family. I'm not being difficult. I'm stating facts. The house is legally mine. I pay the taxes, the insurance, the upkeep. You can't just give it away. We're not asking you to give it away, she countered sharply. We're telling you that the family has to redistribute resources based on who needs them. Daniel has a child to think about. What do you have? A job that keeps you too busy to even use the place? Her words cut deeper than I'd admit. The implication that my life was somehow worth less because I didn't have children wasn't new. It was her favorite weapon. I took a deep breath. Has Daniel even looked at apartments? Smaller homes? Other options? Your father already spoke with Martin, she said, naming our longtime family attorney. There are provisions in your grandmother's will that we can challenge about the house needing to be a primary residence, which you're not doing. My jaw clenched. That was a blatant lie. I knew that will inside out. I had studied it, memorized it. Grandma left the house to me without a single condition. Mom, that's not true. The will is crystal clear. The house is mine, period. Don't tell me what is and isn't true, Clara. Her voice rose, sharp and shrill. You've always been selfish, always putting yourself above family. Daniel needs this house for himself and for Lily. You have 48 hours to collect anything personal you want. After that, your brother is moving in. Before I could respond, my father's voice entered the line. He must have been listening in. Clara, he said with that commanding tone that had silenced me my entire childhood. This isn't up for debate. The decision is final. Daniel and Lily need the house more than you do. This is about doing what's right for the family. Dad, this isn't legal. You can't just decide to take my property. We can and we have, he replied coldly. Martin is drawing up the paperwork now. If you fight this, you'll only be hurting your brother and your niece. Is that really what you want? To deprive a child of a stable home because you're clinging to sentiment? The manipulation was clear, but for a split second, I questioned myself. Was I being selfish? Then it hit me. No, this wasn't about selfishness. This was about respect, about my grandmother's wishes, about standing up for myself after a lifetime of being dismissed. I need to speak with Martin directly, I said firmly. He's away for the weekend, my father replied too quickly. The papers will be ready Monday, but Daniel needs to move sooner. You have 48 hours, Clara. Be reasonable for once in your life. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, my pulse racing. Seconds later, a text came from Daniel. I know this is hard for you, but Lily and I really need this right now. Mom and Dad said you don't even use the house. We'll take care of it. I'll even help you move your things this weekend if you want. His fake sympathy made my blood boil. I called Martin, but his office was closed, and his personal cell went straight to voicemail. I sat alone in my apartment surrounded by case files, the betrayal pressing down on me harder than ever. They weren't just taking a house, they were erasing my grandmother's gift, erasing me, but as the sting of shock faded, something else rose inside me. Determination. I was a lawyer. I specialized in housing rights. If anyone knew how to protect their property, it was me. And I decided in that moment I would not give up without a fight. The clock was ticking 48 hours. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. As a housing rights attorney, I knew exactly what my family was trying to pull. It wasn't just unfair, it was illegal. There were no loopholes, no vague clauses. The will was airtight. That house was mine, no matter what my parents claimed. But I also knew that family conflicts like this could spiral quickly. Emotions, manipulation, and pressure could blur lines until reality itself felt shaky. Not this time. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. Every document I owned spread across the surface: the deed, the will, property tax records, insurance papers. I built a digital case file as if I were preparing for trial. By midnight, I had emailed a colleague of mine, Jenna, an estate lawyer I trusted, weighing out the situation and asking for her take. By 1 a.m., her reply came. Clara, they have no legal ground here. None. But be careful, if they physically move your brother in, you'll have to file for eviction. Don't let them get a foot in the door. Literally, her warning echoed in my mind. Don't let them in. So I mapped out a strategy, a timeline broken down hour by hour for the next 48 hours. If they thought I'd be sitting still, waiting to be robbed of my inheritance, they were mistaken. Saturday morning, my plan went into motion. First, I called a locksmith who handled emergency weekend requests. I'm the homeowner, I explained firmly, and I need every lock replaced immediately. I scheduled him for 9 a.m., offering to pay extra for the urgency. Next, I contacted a security company one of my clients had recommended after I'd helped them win the housing case. They specialized in rapid home security setups, cameras, motion sensors, remote access. By Saturday afternoon, they promised, the house would be under my control. Then I called an old friend, Officer Ryan, who worked for the local police department near my grandmother's neighborhood. I explained everything and asked if he could be present Sunday evening, just in case my family tried to force their way in. Without hesitation, he agreed. I'll bring a partner and the forms we'd need if anyone tries to claim possession, he said. Relief washed over me. With those immediate defenses in place, I turned to the legal side. I drafted a cease and desist letter addressed to my parents and Daniel, asserting my full ownership and forbidding them from attempting to occupy the property. I also prepared an emergency motion for a restraining order ready to file first thing Monday if needed. By noon, I was in my car heading toward my grandmother's house, determination surging through me. In the back seat, I had packed storage bins, not because I'd planned to surrender the home, but because I refused to risk losing her treasures if things got ugly. Her photo albums, her recipe books, her jewelry, those weren't just belongings. They were her life and mine. As I pulled into the driveway, relief spread through me. The house stood quiet, untouched. Sunlight glowed across the porch, and the garden was just beginning to bloom, just like it did every spring. For a moment, grief hit me fresh, not just for my grandmother, but for the family I thought I had. How could they betray me like this? The locksmith arrived promptly at 9. Within an hour, every door had brand new locks. The front had a keypad entry system I could control remotely. The side and back doors were secured with deadbolts. Only I held the keys. Not long after, the security company arrived. They worked quickly, installing cameras at every entry point and setting up motion alerts linked directly to my phone. I could see live feeds from anywhere. They even updated the smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, all tied into the same system. For the first time in days, I felt the house truly protected. While the technicians worked, I carefully packed my grandmother's most precious heirlooms, her wedding ring, the pearl necklace she only wore on holidays, her quilt stitched when I was born, the first edition novels we used to read together. Each piece carried her voice, her love. Never let anyone dim your light. Clara, I could almost hear her whisper as I worked. Stand your ground when you know you're right. By late afternoon, the system was live and I was confident. This wasn't just my grandmother's house anymore. It was my fortress. Just as I was preparing to leave, my phone rang. Daniel. Hey, he said casually, as if nothing had happened. I was thinking of coming by tomorrow morning to measure for curtains and furniture. 9 o'clock work for you? I tightened my grip on the phone. I won't be there tomorrow, Daniel. And before you make any plans, we need to talk about this situation. What's there to talk about? His tone hardened. Mom and Dad already told you what's happening. I need the house. You don't. It's that simple. Nothing about this is simple, I said flatly. The house is legally mine. Grandma left it to me for a reason. Only because you were her favorite, he snapped, his mask slipping. She spoiled you your whole life, and now you're denying my daughter a home just out of spite. Real mature, Clara. This isn't about favoritism. It's about honoring Grandma's wishes and the law. You can't just take what isn't yours. Watch me, he spat, then hung up. I stood in the entryway, staring at the door I had just secured. My grandmother's door. My house. His words didn't rattle me, they only steeled my resolve. For years, I've let my parents' criticism and favoritism silence me. Not anymore. This time, I was ready. The clock was still ticking. But I wasn't afraid. Let them come. That Saturday evening, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Daniel had started sending me a string of texts, photos of furniture, screenshots of paint swatches, even sketches of how he planned to update my house, thinking of painting the living room sage green. What do you think? Does Grandma's dining table still fit in there? Lily and I don't really need something that big. Maybe we can put it in storage or sell it. Mom said you might want the china cabinet. Let me know, otherwise we'll get rid of it. Every message was like a slap in the face. He wasn't just assuming victory, he was acting as if the house was already his. The dining table where I had spent years doing homework while Grandma Evelyn cooked. The china cabinet filled with Depression-era glassware she had lovingly explained to me. They were talking about selling her treasures like they were just junk in the garage. I refused to reply. If I answered, I'd be giving the impression that this was negotiable. At WAS in single quotes T. Around 8, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again and again. By the third time I answered, "Why aren't you responding to your brother's messages?" She demanded immediately. "Hello to you too, Mom," I said evenly. "I don't have anything to say to Daniel about the house. Don't be childish. Clara, he needs your help planning the move. The least you could do is cooperate. There isn't going to be a move," I said firmly. "The house is mine." "I have no intention of giving it to him." Silence. Then a bitter scoff. "So, you're going to fight us on this after everything we've done for you?" I almost laughed at the irony. Everything they had done for me? My education, which I paid for with loans and jobs while Daniel had his covered? My career, which they dismissed as small and insignificant? My accomplishments, which they barely acknowledged? "I'm not fighting anyone," I said calmly. "I'm stating a fact. The house is mine. I understand Daniel's in a tough situation, but taking what doesn't belong to him is not the solution. Your house," she repeated with venom. "You act like you built it yourself. That house has been in the family for generations. It should go to the one who needs it most right now, and that's your brother. That's not how property works. Mom, Grandma left the house to me. That was her choice, her decision. Respect it. Circumstances change, Clara." Her voice cracked into a near shout. "Families adapt." Why are you being so selfish? There it was again, the word they had always used to silence me, selfish, a label slapped on me whenever I dared to set boundaries. It had worked for years, but not anymore. I'm done with this conversation, I said firmly. The house isn't available. Daniel needs to find another way. Your father wants a word, she said, and before I could object, his voice came through the line. Clara, my father said, his tone heavy with authority. I've spoken to Martin. We found precedent to contest the will based on your grandmother's mental state in her final months. My blood boiled. That's absolutely false, and you know it. Grandma was sharp until the very end. Any doctor, any friend, anyone who saw her could confirm that. You're willing to slander her memory just to get your way? That's low even for you. I'm not slandering anyone, he said coldly. I'm telling you what will happen if you refuse to cooperate. A legal battle will be expensive, humiliating, and it will tear this family apart. Is that really what you want? You must be confusing me with someone who's afraid of court, I shot back. I know exactly how this would play out. And you're right about one thing, this is destroying the family. But not in the way you think. The call ended shortly after, but I knew it wouldn't be the last. Sunday morning came with a fresh barrage of pressure. First, an email from my father, attaching a so-called family agreement that supposedly reassigned the house to Daniel temporarily. It was laughable amateur wording, no legal validity, and 0 signatures from anyone who mattered. Still, he sent it with the confidence of a man used to having his declarations accepted without question. By noon, the storm widened. Extended family members suddenly joined the chorus. My mother's sister called to lecture me about doing the right thing for Daniel and Lily. My father's brother texted to express his disappointment in my lack of family loyalty. Even cousins I hadn't spoken to in years had opinions, urging me to hand over the house for the sake of unity. It was a campaign organized, deliberate, relentless. But every phone call, every guilt trip, every manipulative plea only strengthened my resolve. I wasn't that silenced little girl anymore. I was an attorney who knew her rights, and I wasn't going to bend. At 3 p.m., the doorbell rang. I checked the security camera feed on my phone and froze. My parents stood on my apartment building's porch, Daniel at their side. And to make matters worse, he had brought Lily along, my 5-year-old niece, like some kind of pawn in their scheme. I buzzed them in, already bracing for battle. The moment they walked in, I could read their strategy. My mother wore the look of wounded disappointment she had perfected for years. My father clutched a folder stuffed with more dubious papers. Daniel had Lily by the hand, her innocent face clearly meant to soften me. We wanted to talk in person, my mother began, as though this were a normal Sunday visit. Clear the air before tomorrow? There's nothing to clear, I said, not offering them seats. The house is not available. Daniel will have to make other arrangements. Aunt Clara, Lily piped up sweetly, are we going to live in the house with the big swing? My chest tightened. Before I could respond, Daniel jumped in. Yes, sweetie. The house Grandma wanted us to have. The blatant lie nearly made me explode. But instead, I crouched and handed Lily my tablet, already loaded with a kid's game. Why don't you play on this while the grown-ups talk? I said gently. She happily skipped off to the couch, out of earshot. That was unnecessary, Daniel hissed. What's unnecessary is using a child as leverage. I shot back. It won't work. None of this will. The guilt trips, the pressure, the threats, it ends here. The house is mine, legally and morally. And I won't be bullied. We're not bullying you, my father insisted, opening his folder. We're trying to find a reasonable solution to a family crisis. Daniel has nowhere else to go. That's not true, I countered. He has options, apartments, rentals, smaller homes. Chicago has thousands of places available. He doesn't need my house. Do you hear yourself? My mother snapped. Suggesting your brother and niece live in some cramped apartment while a perfectly good family home sits empty? That's heartless. That house is not empty, I said, my voice like steel. It's mine. My property. My decision. You are unbelievably selfish, Daniel spat. You don't even live there. You just keep it like some shrine because Grandma favored you. Meanwhile, I could actually make it a home for my daughter. This isn't about Grandma loving me more, I said firmly. This is about respecting her will, her choice, and the law. You can't just take what you want because you feel entitled. My father slid one of his papers across my counter. This is a notice of our intent to contest the will if you refuse. Martin has already begun the paperwork. I glanced at it. No letterhead. No signature. Not even proper legal language. Just an empty threat dressed up in paper. This isn't worth the ink it's printed with, I said, sliding it back. And if Martin really is part of this scheme, he'll be facing consequences of his own. What you're attempting is fraud. You're threatening our family attorney now? My mother gasped. I'm stating facts, I corrected. Just like the fact that the house is mine and Daniel is not moving in tomorrow or ever. The tension thickened like fog. My father's face flushed crimson. My mother's eyes shimmered with fake tears. Daniel's glare could have burned a hole straight through me. Finally, my father snapped the folder shut. This isn't over. Be prepared for what comes next. I'm always prepared, I replied evenly. The real question is, are you? They left, dragging a confused Lily along with them. I leaned against the door once it shut, exhaling a long, shaky breath that it was exhausting. It was ugly. But one thing had never been clearer. They weren't going to stop, and neither was I. The final 24 hours of their so-called deadline loomed, but I was ready. The house was secured, the paperwork was organized, and I had allies waiting in the wings. Monday morning dawned bright and calm, mocking the storm I knew was coming. I took the day off from work, something I never did, telling my supervisor I had a pressing family property dispute. They didn't ask questions. It was rare for me to step away from cases, and they trusted me by 9 a.m. I was parked down the street from my grandmother's house, legal documents stacked neatly on the passenger seat, the deed, the will, the attorney's letter confirming my ownership, and the emergency restraining order I had filed first thing that morning. The judge had signed it without hesitation. Given the clear threat of illegal entry, Officer Ryan texted to confirm he and his partner would arrive at 10 a.m. exactly when I expected my family to make their move. The security company had also assigned someone to watch the cameras remotely, ready to alert me to any activity. At 9:30, my phone buzzed with an alert. Motion detected. I opened the app. There was my father, circling the house like a vulture, tugging on doorknobs, peering through windows. When the locks didn't budge, he pulled out his phone, pacing the porch with furious gestures. 20 minutes later, a moving truck rumbled up the street, pulling into the driveway. My mother's SUV followed close behind, Daniel in the passenger seat, his face set with grim determination. My father stormed over to them, clearly angry about the locked doors. I watched from my car as Daniel climbed out, marched up to the front door, and tried his old key. It didn't work, of course. The confusion on his face almost made me smile. This was it. I texted Ryan. They're here. Time to move. Then I started my car and drove straight up the driveway, parking deliberately behind the moving truck, blocking it in dot as I stepped out. 3 pairs of eyes turned toward me, shock, anger, disbelief. Finally decided to do the right thing. My mother sneered. I'm here to make sure the right thing does happen, I said calmly, just as Ryan's patrol car pulled up. He and his partner, Officer Alvarez, got out, professional and composed. What's going on here? My father demanded, puffing himself up like the corporate tyrant he was. Miss Grant asked us to be present in case of trespassing. Ryan explained, using my last name as if I were just another resident, not his friend. Trespassing? Daniel scoffed. We're her family. This is our house. No, it isn't, Officer Alvarez said firmly, holding the documentation I provided earlier. This property belongs to Clara Grant. She has not granted you access. Entering would be illegal. This is ridiculous. My mother sputtered. Clara, call them off. This is a family matter. It's a family matter involving an attempt to steal my property, I corrected. Which is why I filed a restraining order this morning. None of you are allowed inside this house without my written consent. I handed each of them a copy of the order. Watching their expressions shift from disbelief to rage was almost satisfying. You filed a restraining order against your own family? Daniel shrieked. Have you completely lost your mind? On the contrary, I said evenly. I've never thought more clearly. Grandma left this house to me. It's legally mine. No amount of bullying changes that. My father glared at me, then smirked coldly. This won't last. I spoke with Martin this morning. He's already preparing to challenge the will. Oh, really? I said, pulling out my phone. That's strange, because I spoke to Martin myself an hour ago. Would you like to hear what he actually said? Before he could answer, I pressed play on a recorded call. For the record, Miss Grant, I never advised your family that there were grounds to contest Evelyn Grant's will. The will is legally sound, and you are the sole rightful owner. If Robert or Margaret Grant have said otherwise, they misrepresented my professional opinion. The blood drained from my father's face. My mother looked from him to me, confused, while Daniel stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing with no sound. You lied. My mother whispered, her voice cracking. He was being overly cautious, my father muttered, his authority unraveling. There are other attorneys who would take the case. No reputable one, I cut in. The will is ironclad. Grandma was of sound mind. Every document was airtight, and there are zero provisions that would allow you to steal it. You're out of moves. Tears welled in Daniel's eyes. So what now? Lily and I have nowhere to go. We gave up our apartment. Our things are in that truck. For a fleeting second, I felt sympathy. He was manipulative, yes, but he was also a father with a child. Still, that didn't justify betrayal. You still have options, I said softly but firmly. Short-term rentals, smaller places. I'll even help you find something. But this house isn't one of them. My mother's face hardened. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. Humiliating us in front of police. Leaving your brother and niece homeless. They're not homeless because of me, I replied. They're homeless because you promised them something that wasn't yours to give. You created this mess, not me. My father, sensing defeat, finally straightened his jacket and spoke. Let's go, he muttered. This isn't the time or place, but what about our stuff? Daniel asked desperately, gesturing at the moving truck. Find somewhere else for it, my father barked. Come on. As they left, Officer Alvarez reminded them of the restraining order. Any attempt to enter the property again without permission will result in immediate arrest. They nodded stiffly and drove away, the moving truck trailing behind. I stood there, my heart pounding, watching them disappear. Relief, sadness, anger all tangled inside me. But above all, I felt something new. Peace. As the patrol car pulled away, Ryan lingered for a moment. You okay? He asked quietly. I looked up at my grandmother's house, my house standing steady and unshaken despite the storm it had just endured. I'm better than okay, I said. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm exactly where I should be, but I knew this wasn't the end. My parents weren't the type to walk away quietly. There would be fallout, more guilt trips, more attempts at manipulation. Still, something inside me had shifted. I had drawn a line, and for once, I wasn't backing down. The next few days were chaos. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from every corner of the family tree. Some were furious, accusing me of cruelty, of betrayal, of turning my back on blood. Others were dripping with fake sympathy, urging me to just let it go for the sake of peace. My mother's sister, Aunt Helen, left a voicemail so scathing it almost made me laugh. I never thought I'd see the day when a Grant would betray her own family. Your grandmother would be ashamed. The irony of her using my grandmother's name against me wasn't lost on me. Evelyn Grant had been the only one who truly saw me, who believed in me. Thankfully, not everyone swallowed my parents' story. My cousin Marcus texted, "Hey, I heard their version, but I want to hear yours. You okay?" When I explained the truth, his reply was simple but steady. "That sounds exactly like them." Good for you for standing up. Daniel's messages, meanwhile, swung wildly between rage and pleading. "You've ruined everything." Then hours later, "Please, Clara, just let us stay a few months until I can save for a deposit. Don't do this to Lily." I didn't waver. I offered to help him find housing, even said I'd pitch in for a security deposit. But the house was non-negotiable. My father tried a different angle, sending a formal email, an offer where I would sign the house over to Daniel in exchange for a sum of money that wasn't even half its market value. I didn't dignify it with a reply. The house wasn't for sale. Not then, not ever. Through a mutual acquaintance, I learned that Daniel and Lily had moved into my parents' guest house. So much for their crisis of homelessness. Clearly, it had all been a manipulative ploy. The revelation didn't surprise me, but it did steel my resolve even further. A week later, I received an unexpected email from Martin, our family attorney. He apologized for being dragged into the mess and said he felt ethically obligated to share some things with me. Attached were several emails between him and my parents, and what I read floored me. They hadn't just come up with this scheme after Daniel's divorce. They had been plotting since the day Grandma Evelyn died. For 3 years, they had been searching for loopholes, consulting attorneys, trying to find any way to snatch the house back from me. Every lawyer they approached told them the same thing, that the will was airtight. But they kept looking, waiting for the right excuse. Daniel's divorce wasn't the reason. It was the opportunity. One email from my father chilled me to the core. "This house has been in our family for generations." My mother's decision to leave it to Clara was short-sighted and emotional. "We need to correct this mistake." Reading those words, my stomach twisted. This wasn't about helping Daniel. It was about control. It was about erasing me, rewriting the narrative to make sure I never had anything of my own. I forwarded the emails to Jenna, my estate attorney friend. Her response was blunt. "This borders on conspiracy to commit fraud. If you wanted to, you could take legal action. At the very least, you now have documentation that will crush any future attempt they make." For the first time in years, I saw it clearly. This wasn't about me being selfish. This wasn't about me not being enough. This was about them. Their control. Their inability to handle the fact that Grandma chose me, and I decided right then I wasn't going to let them rewrite history. Not anymore. The truth hit me like a tidal wave. For years, I had blamed myself for never being enough, for not meeting my parents' impossible standards, for never being the golden child like Daniel. But those emails proved what I had always felt deep down. It had never been about me. It had always been about their control. Still, knowing the truth didn't make the pain vanish. The betrayal ran deep, and I needed help sorting through it. So I found a therapist who specialized in family trauma. She helped me untangle the patterns I had lived through my entire life, the golden child versus scapegoat dynamic, the emotional manipulation, the conditional love. Your grandmother seems to have been the only truly healthy influence in your life, she told me in one session. She saw your worth when others didn't. She wanted to protect you by giving you something they couldn't take away. By standing your ground, you're not just honoring her will, you're honoring yourself. Those words resonated more deeply than I could explain. Where my parents were critical, Grandma Evelyn had been supportive. Where they withheld love, she gave it freely. Where they saw me only as a reflection of their ambitions, she saw me as my own person. As the weeks passed, the storm began to quiet, at least on the surface. The endless barrage of texts and calls slowed. My mother tried a new approach, calling one Sunday afternoon as though nothing had ever happened. "We've all been under a lot of stress," she said lightly. "Let's just put this behind us. Come for dinner next weekend." I almost laughed. "I'm not ready for that," I told her firmly. "This wasn't a misunderstanding, Mom. That was a calculated attempt to take something that doesn't belong to you. I need time to process that betrayal. You've always been so dramatic," she sighed, slipping back into the old dismissal. "Families fight. You need to learn to forgive and forget. This wasn't just a fight," I said, my voice hardening. "This was an organized effort to defraud me, complete with lies, threats, and manipulation. That's not something I can just forget over Sunday roast." The call ended abruptly, but for once I didn't feel small. I felt strong. Meanwhile, I started spending more and more time at my grandmother's house. At first, just a few nights a week. Then, gradually, I stayed longer. The commute was brutal, but the peace I felt within those walls was worth every extra mile. I cleaned out the old guest room where I'd stayed as a teenager and turned it into my new bedroom. I tended the garden Evelyn had taught me to care for, kneeling in the soil as her perennials broke through again, stubborn and beautiful. I cooked in her kitchen, slept under her handmade quilts, and let her presence fill the empty spaces. Sometimes I'd sit on the porch swing and close my eyes. And in those moments, I could almost hear her voice. "You stood your ground, Clara. You honored yourself. And you honored me. That's all I ever wanted for you, despite the hurt. Despite the fractures in my family that might never heal, a strange peace began to take root. The house wasn't just shelter, it was a sanctuary. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had truly come home. The journey wasn't over. I knew there would be more battles, more attempts at guilt and manipulation. But this time, I was ready. For the first time, I felt equipped to face them on my terms, grounded in truth. Not shamed. As spring turned to summer, I poured myself into the house. I painted the sunroom a warm yellow that made even the grayest mornings glow. I refinished the hardwood floors that had been hidden under carpet for decades, letting them shine again. I updated the kitchen carefully, blending modern convenience with the vintage touches Grandma Evelyn adored. Every change was intentional. Every brushstroke and repair whispered the same message: "This is mine. This is home." The garden became my refuge. Following Evelyn's worn gardening journal, I replanted the beds with the same flowers she had once nurtured, adding a few of my own along the way. Kneeling in the soil, watching life push through the earth, I felt myself healing alongside it. Slowly, I began to build a new circle around me. The neighbors who had once known Evelyn welcomed me warmly, offering casseroles and gardening advice. I invited colleagues over for dinners in the same dining room where I had once done homework as a child. I joined the local historical society Evelyn had loved, helping preserve the neighborhood's stories. And then I did something that made me feel closer to her than ever. I created a small scholarship fund in her name. The Evelyn Grant Resilience Scholarship would support law students from difficult family backgrounds, students like me. It wasn't going to change the world, but it might change one life at a time. And that was enough. 3 months after the confrontation, I received a letter from Daniel. Unlike his earlier texts and outbursts, this letter was different. It was raw, honest, almost humble. "I owe you an apology," he wrote. I was so caught up in my own struggles that I never stopped to think about what that house meant to you, or that what Mom and Dad asked me to do was wrong. Since everything happened, I've been reflecting on our family, and I see now that the way we've treated you wasn't fair. I'm sorry for my part in it. He went on to explain that he had finally found an apartment he could afford. He and Lily were settling in, and he had even started therapy to understand the patterns he'd been repeating. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he concluded. "I just wanted you to know that you standing up for yourself made me look at things differently." I read his words over and over, letting them sink in. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was something. A start. I wrote back simply, thanking him for the apology and wishing him well. We weren't ready to rebuild, but maybe someday we could. My parents, however, were another story. My father made one last attempt at intimidation, sending a certified letter threatening legal action unless I returned the house to the family. With Jenna's help, I drafted a short, cutting reply complete with copies of the emails Martin had provided, exposing their years-long plot. After that, the threats went silent. My mother's approach was stranger. She began sending cards on birthdays, on holidays. No mention of the house, no mention of the war she and my father had waged against me. Just cheerful notes signed with love, as if nothing had ever happened. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away, but I couldn't accept them either. They sat in a box, sealed reminders of her refusal to face the truth. The hardest lesson of all was realizing that family doesn't always mean unconditional love. Sometimes it comes with conditions so heavy they crush you if you let them. And I was done letting them 6 months after the showdown. My life looked completely different. The Victorian house that had once been the center of conflict was now truly my home. After much thought, I sold my downtown apartment and moved into Grandma Evelyn's house permanently. The commute was long, but waking up each morning surrounded by her memories was worth every extra minute, and traffic. The first weeks were the hardest. The silence from my parents was deafening, broken only by the occasional manipulative message. "Can't we just put this behind us? You're tearing the family apart over bricks and mortar." Every message reinforced my choice to keep my distance. At first, the solitude was painful. Dysfunctional as they were still my family, and their absence left an ache that echoed through the house. Some nights, I questioned myself. Had I been too harsh? Too unyielding? But whenever doubt crept in, I'd pull out Evelyn's letter from my desk drawer and read her words again. "This house has sheltered 4 generations of strong women. Now it will shelter you, Clara, as you carve your own path." Her faith in me was the anchor I needed. Therapy helped too. Session by session, I untangled the knots of gaslighting, favoritism, and control that had shaped me. I came to see what I had never dared admit. The problem had never been me. It had always been them, their inability to see me as a person outside their expectations. As I healed, I began reclaiming the house, making it mine in ways Evelyn would have approved of. I refinished the hardwood floors, turning them into gleaming pathways of memory. I brightened the sunroom with sunlight yellow paint. I carefully updated the kitchen while preserving the vintage stove Evelyn had adored. Every project was an act of defiance and devotion, all at once proof that I wasn't just keeping the house. I was breathing new life into it. The garden became my sanctuary. I followed Evelyn's gardening journal, planting her favorite perennials while adding new blooms of my own. There was something profoundly healing about watching seeds push through the soil, turning into life against all odds. And slowly, my circle of support grew. Neighbors who had known Evelyn invited me into their lives with casseroles and advice. Colleagues became friends around my dining table. I joined the historical society Evelyn once loved, helping preserve the stories of the neighborhood. The house wasn't just shelter anymore. It was community. It was legacy. It was me. 3 months after Daniel's apology letter, I hosted my first gathering, a garden party in honor of Evelyn. The peonies were in full bloom, the weather perfect, the house glowing with new life. As I watched my friends and neighbors laughing among the flowers she had planted, I felt her presence like a gentle hand on my shoulder. Later, when the last guest left and twilight fell over the porch, I sat alone on the swing, listening to the creak of the old wood beneath me. The pain hadn't vanished entirely. I still grieved for the family relationships I had lost, or maybe the ones I never truly had. But alongside the grief was something stronger. Peace. This house had sheltered generations before me. Now it was sheltering me, not just from the storms outside, but from the storms I had finally learned to withstand within. In protecting it, I had discovered how to protect myself. And in standing my ground, I had finally learned to honor who I was meant to be. The days after the garden party felt like a turning point. For the first time in a long time, the house didn't feel like a battlefield, it felt like home. I still received the occasional card from my mother, always cheerful, always pretending the war between us had never happened. I never replied. My father stayed silent, his last failed attempt at intimidation hanging like a shadow he couldn't shake. Daniel and I exchanged the rare message short, civil, almost fragile. We weren't rebuilding our relationship yet, but at least the anger had cooled. His apology had been a start, a small crack in the walls that had stood between us for years. But my parents? That bridge was burned. And maybe that was okay. The hardest truth I learned was this: sometimes family isn't unconditional. Sometimes love from the people who should give it most freely comes with strings so heavy they drag you under. For years, I bent myself into knots trying to earn their approval. I worked harder, achieved more, tolerated their cruelty, all in the desperate hope that one day they'd see me. But Evelyn had seen me all along. She saw my strength, my independence, my worth. And in leaving me this house, she gave me the one thing my parents never could: freedom. Now, I chose my family. The neighbors who welcomed me, the colleagues who showed up when I needed them, the friends who sat at my table and laughed under Evelyn's roof. These were the people I could trust. 6 months to the day after the confrontation, I stood in the garden as the peonies bloomed again, brighter than ever. I thought of Evelyn's words, her wisdom, her love. You stood your ground, Clara. You honored me. And you honored yourself. The grief was still their grief for what I had lost and for what I had never truly had. But alongside it was something stronger, something steadier. Peace. This house was more than walls and windows. It was resilience. It was love passed down through generations. And now it was mine to protect. Sometimes the family you're born into tries to break you. But sometimes the greatest act of love you can give yourself is to say no, to stand firm, even against those closest to you. Evelyn had taught me to stand tall in the face of injustice. And now, in honoring her gift, I had finally learned to honor myself. Have you ever had to stand up to family who tried to take advantage of you? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to know I'm not alone. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is draw a line and protect what matters most.